listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord!
Praise God!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me will be Sean.
Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. So this episode will technically come out Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. So, but depending on the way most people download this, probably will listen to it after Christmas. I don't think too many people are sitting there playing their podcast before Christmas, or maybe they are. If you have a family that annoys you and you just put your headphones in and listen to other stuff, happy holidays.
Yeah, if you just want to skip Christmas and get back into New Year's, so
yeah,
we've got that for you.
Yeah, so we'll be discussing the 1980 film New Year's Evil, which is one of the few horror movies focused on New Year's, because there wasn't a lot of them that I could think of. I know, so that Hulu series Into the Dark that has done like Puka and everything. So I think their next one comes out soon, and it is New Year's Eve focused, because it's pretty much they have an anthology series where each month they release one new movie that is about something that takes place in the month that's released. So the first one was called The Body and is about Halloween. The second one was called Flesh and Blood and is about Thanksgiving, kind of. And the third one was called Puka and is about Christmas, kind of.
Is Puka good? I thought I heard some good buzz about
So it's
that.
by Nacho Vigalondo, who had also done Time Crimes.
Oh, okay,
and,
wow.
But I did not dig it. Like, I watched it, the character design. So, not to go off too much of a tangent, but the thing that to me really breaks movies and makes them like, okay, you really got to work hard to get me back now, is when a movie has stuff in it about businesses, or because in that one the idea is this guy's an actor that's in a new town and he gets offered a gig as wearing the costume as like kind of a mascot for this new toy Puka that's like this big international thing, or this big national trend, like a big holiday Christmas toy. But it's like there's only one store and it's like a pop-up local store. Like, it's just whenever they bring business side of stuff into it, and it has the level of accuracy you'd expect out of a Nickelodeon kids show in terms of how the business works and how the toys work and advertising and all that stuff, then it's like, okay, like, I mean, I get that not everybody that writes these movies comes from a business background or worked in retail or something, but when you have like these representations, like, this is so not realistic.
And I guess the film, it's not like surreal or anything in any ways, right? Is it supposed to feel grounded, or is it supposed to feel like an allegory or fantasy?
It goes more off the rails as it goes along, and it was just like, so that element was just kind of just like, okay, this one guy is, because like at this point there's pretty much not like a national trend toy that starts on the local level. It's a big thing that gets a big promotional push. Internet, like, it's on TV, it's on internet, it's on the morning shows, all that stuff. It's not really kind of a grassroots thing, and I don't think people line up for a toy that they haven't heard of. Like,
what you're saying.
People wouldn't be lined up around the block to get some toy from a little pop-up shop in a strip mall. They would be going to Amazon and buying it, or going to Target or Walmart or stuff like. So, take that element out. It really wasn't scary. Not that anything is ever really that scary to people that watch a lot of horror, but to me, there weren't any really effectively done sequences with it. And then it kind of goes in a more, there is a twist to the end. And when the twist came, I don't want to spoil it too much, but that movie's Ghost Stories I talked about that had like Martin Freeman in it a while back.
Yeah.
It reminded me very much, the movies reminded me very much of each other in terms of how it ended. And I was like, it was better, I think, than the other two, The Body and Flesh and Blood. But I did not think, like, they just feel cheap. And I get that they're probably shooting them on a limited budget and a limited time frame.
Are these Blumhouse co-produced?
Yes. It's Blumhouse with Hulu. So they feel, because like Flesh and Blood was mostly one location. And then Puka was like at mostly an apartment building and like a few small other locations. It just, they feel contained, and they feel like even like the filmmaker behind Puka was somebody whose other work I've enjoyed greatly. Or at least some of his work I've enjoyed a lot. And this one just felt like the filmmakers are probably constrained by a script and time and money. And
yeah, I'm curious to see what the budget is. Because, I mean, you would think they probably would maybe position this like a TV show, you know, based on like, okay, we're going to produce an hour and a half worth of content.
I would assume that the budgets for these movies are far lower than the individual episode of a show like Breaking Bad or something. Because I know a lot of times like a Breaking Bad episode would be like a $2 to $3 million budget.
Oh yeah, well that's what I was thinking. Blumhouse, if they spend $5 million on theatrical releases, I know if this is a co-production, Hulu may be throwing some money there too. But what are they going to be spending on this? If they're
I would be shocked if the budgets for any of these episodes was over $1 million.
Yeah.
Now I could be wrong because sometimes, you know, there's that one Jim Carrey comedy a couple years ago where the budget was $40 million. It's like, but on what?
Yeah.
I guess just salaries, but yeah. So I haven't been hot on any of those. I mean, other people I've seen enjoy them.
How many's coming out? So what are going to hit? Valentine's Day?
There's 12.
Same. Oh, wow. So
because there's one for every month for a year.
I thought it was maybe like a 6-month deal. Wow.
Yeah, because
that's interesting.
Yeah, because there's one for every month. Now, some of the months might be a little bit leaner, and I think they kind of adjust the release schedule based on that. Because usually I think they release like the ones that are holiday based, like well before the holidays, so you have time to watch it. Because I saw a lot of people who like that one, The Body. I just didn't get into it, and it was initially based on a short from a different anthology movie. It's like this felt like a 30-minute top story, not because it's people hacking into the police network and deleting body cam footage and then finding all their friends' hacked phone or hacking in and finding their friends' phones over GPS. It's like these are just plot devices that are, you know, like kind of Deus Ex Machina or stuff. Yeah. It's like, no, like whenever people start using some fakes, you know, CSI looking interface to find a cell phone and triangulate, it's like,
you're just disconnected from the drama.
So these shows, if they all kind of have that element to them of like fudging the facts and not being very realistic and, you know, making a comedy TV show like Chuck from years ago, the NBC show, making that show, because that show had like fake technology stuff that was kind of annoying, but it was a comedy and you enjoy the characters, so you're a little bit easier to go along with it. But if you're not enjoying any of the characters and you're not really being pushed along by something, then it's harder to overlook these kind of like really, you know, distracting elements. And I get that, you know, you can watch Transformers or Jurassic Park. It's like, oh, there's a dinosaur running around. You're not upset about that, but you're annoyed by the computer display being wrong. It's like, well, you use the computer every single day. And when things there are false, it stands out more to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because that's the world they live in. There are no dinosaurs. So that's something that doesn't exist. And anything that's representing it, like it's a leap of... If you even go to see the movie about a big dinosaur, you're kind of bought into the concept. But then when people start having the fake, you know, interfaces and phones that can do stuff that can't really... like, that's where people get pulled out a little bit more because it's the thing they live in every day. Maybe it's just being nitpicking, but...
Well, I think there's a difference. Sometimes if you said it like in the near future... and you're using it to make a point about something thematically, something like Her, you know, like that works because they've created this world and justification, and it's kind of the point of it. But sometimes when that stuff is, when it seems like the world is all based on reality, but then they're using these things to kind of explain away different plot elements or get from A to B because they can't think of any other interesting way to do it, you know, and they just use it as like, oh, basically it's just like Harry Potter magic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, we have this spell. Like it's just Deus Ex Machina with a computer. Yeah, that's when it's like disappointing because there's no build up, there's nothing. It's all of a sudden something you didn't know exists to like, solve a problem. So you never had a chance to kind of be involved.
Well, it feels kind of like what the movie Thank You for Smoking that had Aaron Eckhart in it. They want to have like a story about like a guy that's like a futuristic space movie where the lead's like a big action star, movie star, and he's like smoking a cigarette in space. And like, yeah, well, he couldn't because of lack of the oxygen. He's like, just say we created the something that does it. So I feel like a lot of stories just back themselves into, you know, creative corner, and then to get out of it, they just have a technology solution that doesn't exist, and then that like. Just the seams show through of a lot of things. The more you watch behind the scenes, the more you get involved in making film stuff yourself, you can see a lot of the seams and stuff, where you can see like, oh, this story idea is not very well thought out. But yeah, like some people have really enjoyed those, so maybe you can enjoy them, check them out. Just to me, none of them grabbed me. maybe it's just getting spoiled from seeing some of the production value that goes into stuff like Black Mirror, where they do seem to have like bigger stars, a little bit more budget. Because that show has
even still some episodes of that.
Some of those don't work.
Are hamstrung. You know what I mean? The budget, like it might be set in the near future, and they look fine and serviceable, but they're not as convincing as a feature film.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of those don't work too.
Yeah.
Some of those kind of fall flat, but they also have these kind of near future, current time, like messed up technology stories. But sometimes, if the entire thing is about the world that exists has this element to it. Like the Bryce Dallas Howard one about like social media stuff.
Yeah.
Like once they ground a world and say this is the world, then it's easier to go with it. But yeah, so those shows are out there, but I haven't seen that. I have not seen the New Year's Eve one yet because I don't have a chance. I'm not sure if it's out yet, but I'll probably try to check that out. At some point though, if I just don't get into any of these whatsoever, unless there's like a filmmaker involved I really like, I probably will drop off of these. Yeah, but so before we get into discussing New Year's Evil, we can briefly touch on some news and things we've been watching that are related to stuff that's like out now or coming out now soon.
Real quick, did you see that tweet I sent you this morning about Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Productions?
No.
They are, so don't need to age or anything. They are accepting scripts right now.
Oh.
That you can just send in a script. No, you don't need to age it, nothing.
That's interesting.
But, as I think Robert Cargill,
Robert C. Cargill, the guy that wrote.
I never say his name out loud. I just read it, and of course, you're reading something. It's just
was it Massaworm on Twitter? Or
yes,
something?
I just see the first letter and the last one. But he made a point to say like, hey, because there's no representation needed or anything, expect to wait a very long time to hear back because of the amount of submissions they're probably going to get. But yeah, they're taking open submissions right now. Jordan Peele's production. Yeah, I tweeted you this morning. I meant to bring it up before we started.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that. Well, too, like the reason that doesn't happen very often, the reason that a lot of people don't take unsolicited scripts from people that don't have representation is that if they receive an email with a script in it and they say they're going to read it and they never do, they just say they will to the person. And let's just say the script is about a magician that steals a bank vault during the middle of like a TV show that he's doing. It's like a David Blaine type magician pulls off a bank heist while they're doing their show.
I can't believe you just gave away my plot. My new movie.
Yeah, coins. But so somebody sends them a script. They say they're going to read it. And then they get a different script that some writer wrote that had nothing to do with that, never saw that, never heard of it, doesn't know that person. They get a script. And they're like, oh, okay. And they make this movie. And then the person that submitted that script and they said they knew that they were supposed to read it. And there's like 4 key elements that are the same. They're going to sue them. And depending on like their representation and how far they take it, they could get money and charge them millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So that's why typically people do not take unsolicited materials from people that don't have representation. Because usually you're dealing with agents and all that stuff, they'll, pass the script along and there's the official channels and there's not as much risk of someone just, somebody could write a script that's really broad with the entire intention of just getting people to read it and then suing them if something happens with some of those elements. So that's why that doesn't happen as often.
They said make sure you read the, the fine print, because I'm sure they cover their stuff pretty well. I wonder if this will ever happen again, though, because you think they're going to get so many submissions
that they'll have
that it's just going to be so much stuff. And then, are they going to run up to any problems because something like that's going to happen,
Yeah.
Too bad we don't have a script on hand. I'm working on something right now, I can't just make one.
Well, and two, some of the the short film or some of the different contests we've entered over the years will have rules that state, because like El Rey had some contest for that show a couple of years or a year ago, the filmmaker without a crew or Robo Without a Crew, where you submit an idea and you can make, if you get selected, you can make a feature film, but you had to shoot it in 7 days for $7,000 or whatever.
With like no crew, basically.
But one of the rules when you submit you didn't have to submit an entire script, you just submitted a treatment. And part of the agreement for that said that we are under good faith. If we like any of your ideas, we will reach out to you to discuss a deal. Otherwise, if any script ever gets produced by us that has any elements similar to or related to your film, you will not be able to sue us, as we will reach out in good faith if we're interested in the ideas. Otherwise, we are not going to take anything. So they just lay out language that gives them the wiggle room that if you write a script and 5 years from now, Robert Rodriguez makes a movie that has some similar concepts to your script, you can't sue them because of the rules of that contest stated. If they want them, they'll reach out to you. Otherwise, it's incidental if anything ever seems similar.
Which, I mean, I think it's fair. Like, hey, you know, nobody's forcing you to submit these things. You know, you're taking the risk when you do it. If they're up front, you're up front. Like, I think it's cool that, you know, normally, like you've said, that's normally not the case to be able to do open submissions. So it's cool that they're like, hey, yeah, open submissions. And I'm sure it's probably the same sort of deal with that. Yeah,
it's probably the same type of rules that say we're not bound to read your material. If we are interested, we will reach you to negotiate. And, you know.
Yeah. And I think they outline, too, they might be outlining exactly what they're looking for. And you can imagine, you know, what his company was probably looking for is a different flavor of what Blumhouse, you know, is probably looking for.
I mean, they want submissions about how we should build that damn wall. But yeah, that's cool.
Yes, that's very cool.
And then like, so Jordan Peele, there's been some images released from his movie Us that's supposed to be coming out soon. So initially, some of the basic plot details that have been released sounded kind of like it might be a home invasion thriller, so kind of a take on The Strangers. But then the more recent news has said that it's going to be a monster movie. So it's one of those things where I don't...
And there's speculation that there might be doppelgangers or something based on the imagery of... It's the ink blots are like two faces facing away, and then the scissors they sent out to people also look like that. And they did that one teaser poster that's very Nightmare on Elm Street-ish.
Yeah,
with
like scissors,
the leather gloves, scissors, the red like sweater or whatever.
It's got like Lupita Nyong'o in it, who had been in Black Panther and was the voice of Maz Kanata in the Star Wars movies. And I think Elizabeth Moss is in it, who was like on Mad Men and Handmaid's Tale. So
Tim Heidecker, right? Did you know that?
I'm trying to remember what
I think Tim Heidecker's in it from Tim and Eric, of course.
And then wasn't he also on that Aziz Ansari show, Master of None?
Wait, no, I'm thinking maybe it's not.
Let's see.
That was Eric. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Tim Heidecker is something different. Okay. So Eric was the one that was on the other show. And then it's got Winston Duke in Us, who was in Black Panther, as like the leader of the rival tribe that ended up being great. Like. So it's got a good cast, and it's one of those things where I would assume that it's going to subvert some expectations based on the way that, you know, Get Out worked. So I don't really even want to watch the trailer because I liked Get Out, so I'm just going to watch it.
When does the movie come out?
March 15th, 2019.
I can't wait. I'm going to watch it. It's Christmas Day, so it'll be at the same time this is up. So this will be slightly dated, but I'm going to watch the trailer. I can't wait.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that a lot because it's just, you know, like Jordan Peele, like, so hopefully it's not a sophomore slump. Hopefully it's also like an equally entertaining film.
And I'm not even, you know, I just want it to be 70% of Get Out because, you know, he had that idea for a long time, was working on it. Like, you know, he says like what people are going to expect out of me. You know what I mean? Like, because it's fine. It doesn't need to be.
It's a very unenviable position because he made Get Out, which made a ton of money and was really well received and got even like Oscar nominations and didn't like the screenplay one. Didn't it? I think
I don't remember, but yeah,
I'm pretty sure it did. And then for like, I think it was just screenplay, and it didn't win the other awards. But so you know, have this movie that's like a huge success critically, commercially, made way more money than they ever thought, and now it's like his second movie. There's almost no way it can outperform the first one. No. Just because like adult-oriented genre thrillers that have like elements in it and stuff, there's like a box office cap. They're not going to gross Avengers money. But I think, you know, if a movie costs $10 million to make, 10 to 15 million to make, and then it grosses, you know, 200 worldwide, that's a smashing success. Really, even like 100 worldwide would be better than most adult-oriented dramas now. So it's one of those things where I just look forward to seeing stuff from him. And they're doing the Twilight Zone reboot.
Yeah.
And then they have like the one that's like the Creature at 20,000 Feet or whatever, and Adam Scott's in it this time instead of John Lithgow or William Shatner. And I think that's the only one where they took an old episode and redid it and reimagined it and kind of subverted.
I hope it's really different. You know what I mean?
Well,
because they've already been remade twice.
Yeah.
And I love those.
Because one of the podcasts I listened to that Adam Scott was on, he was saying that, you know, it's not the same story. There are a lot that they do go in different places and kind of re-envision it for today. But I think he said the rest of the episodes are all original stories, at least from the ones that he was aware of. So I look forward to seeing that too, because the Twilight Zone, kind of Black Mirror, Twilight Zone, kind of the same world, but Twilight Zone won't be keyed in on technology as much as I don't think.
Yeah.
But it'll have...
Which could make it more timeless.
Yeah. So, because a lot of those original episodes, setting aside the production value and the difference in TV acting in the 60s today, like a lot of those still stand up something you can watch now.
Yeah, I'm really interested in seeing... what's the name of the film? I already forgot. Us. But it does seem apparent from what we've seen so far, what we know, that it is going to be a lower, smaller scale. Because after Get Out, he was approached to do Akira.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what's the budget on that? Like, he's not trying to do the typical make one film, go make a superhero film, like Josh Trank or something, and get stomped on by the studio. And then, he's like, I wonder if it, because he has had a career in Hollywood, he knows how things works.
Yeah.
He knows how he's seen people's careers get twisted, I'm sure. So, he worked on Mad TV, then he had his show making basically short films every week.
Yeah. Well, then they did Keanu. That was kind of like their deal. They didn't direct, like,
they didn't write
direct it.
They didn't write that either.
They're involved in the writing of it.
Did they? Okay. For some reason, I don't know why I didn't think they wrote that. I thought it was somebody on their show that wrote it.
It was written by Jordan Peele and Alex Rubens.
Okay. Yeah. So I think he is not somebody who is like somebody's giving. He's somebody's not dangling for it and he's jumping for it. He's like, why? Why do that?
Well, he's
now?
somebody that had the career on the show. Had been in other movies and things, had their own movie that they starred in and he was a writer of, and then had his own movie. So I think his perspective is, here's what I want to do. I want to do these kind of social, not all social message movies, but do thrillers that have social elements in them, or, something to say or some type of ultimate point, which is a lot of like what the Twilight Zone originally was, and even Star Trek from like Gene Roddenberry and stuff. So kind of go back to that idea. So why jump into $200 million studio films where you're
control,
kind of a micromanager?
Yeah.
And for some people, they thrive in that environment. Like the Russo brothers that have done the Infinity War and like Captain America Civil War and stuff like that. They initially directed TV. Like they directed, I think, like Community and other stuff. So
Arrested Development. Yeah,
Arrested Development. So some people like thrive in like ensemble cast, like, not really owning the shop, but running it. And then some people want to write from beginning to end and be involved in the production of it. So
I'm sure he has a lot of stuff in his head he wants to get out, and he knows if he does that leap, he's not going to get to do that. And it's hard. I mean, Rian Johnson, he's he went back. He's doing Knives Out now, which is a murder mystery.
The thing that sucks for Rian Johnson is, whether or not you love or hate Last Jedi, at this point, he will never be able to make another movie that doesn't have a fanboy element that goes after him, regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
And before that, if he had never done Last Jedi, a lot of people, like, if he's making this Knives Out or these other movies, people are like, oh, okay, cool. But since they hated that movie so much, they're just immediately going to try to have like a downvote campaign for everything that exists. And it's sad that happens.
And I'm sure too, he's going to learn a lot making these smaller films before he jumps into something like that. If he ever wants to jump into something like that. And two,
well, he's making that Star Wars trilogy still, supposedly.
No, I'm talking about Jordan Peele.
Oh,
sorry,
Peele.
I'm talking about Jordan Peele. You know what I mean? Making some smaller films, making some, let's just call them mistakes, even though I wouldn't say anything. And Get Out was a mistake. But he can make mistakes and take risks now. Yeah. And not worry about the consequences. We're like Colin Trevorrow, who, now seemingly has been backed off a lot of that stuff. And, a lot of these directors too, they may get that big film, like Amazing Spider-Man, even, how that went down.
Mark Webb.
And then you end up going back to making smaller scale films anyway. So might as well make some that you like now, and people still think you're on fire, and then you'll always have those offers coming in.
Well, it's kind of like, if you're a renowned pizza chef, don't go make a steakhouse. Like, if you want to keep making pizza, make pizza.
Yeah, make some pizza for a while and build up your cred, and that way, if you do have a misfire, it won't be like, oh, that first thing was a fluke or something. I'm going to set this over here. Talking about.
But yeah, so then just other brief news. There's a trailer out for the new Hellboy movie, which is directed by Neil Marshall and has David Harbour in it as Hellboy, who was on Stranger Things. And the trailers for it, the trailer had kind of a light tone that looked more in line with kind of what the original Hellboys were, in terms of like Hellboy having a sense of humor and it, being like fun action.
So was the comics not really that?
I think the comics a little bit darker. I mean, I think like anything, there was some, like, now if somebody's a Hellboy aficionado, I have not read them. I just remember what others had told me. is that, you know, like anything, you have some elements of humor, but you also have like these more darker stories. And I think that the Hellboy movies, the first and second one, were more Guillermo del Toro movies that had those characters in the world. And I think that was why they wanted to back off and not give him the money to make a third one, and instead make something that was more true to the comics and maybe a little bit wider range of appeal that doesn't require... Because anytime you go down the rabbit hole of sequels, you do require some amount of pre-knowledge to watch them and enjoy them.
Yeah, it's been a long time at this point. It's been a decade.
Yeah, and the only other thing is like those Hellboy movies, they have been on FX in nonstop rotation for like a decade now.
Yeah.
Because I remember Hellboy 1 being on like every single day. But, you know, the new trailer didn't really grab me. You know, like I know a lot of times trailers are cut poorly and not by the filmmakers, they're cut by the marketing arm. And there's been a lot of filmmakers who are really mad with how the trailers portrayed their movies or the things they gave away. But as it is, just the trailer didn't really entice me that much. I mean, I still will probably check the movie out, but it just made me wonder if, like, if they're going to make a movie that's pretty close in tone and everything to the original, why didn't they just figure out some way to get it made with Del Toro? But, I mean, because like I said, like you said, you didn't even finish the second one, right? Like watching it.
I've only seen parts of it on TV, basically. So like the first one, that is how I watched the first one. It was on TV so much.
Yeah,
and I've watched it all, but yeah, I've watched like the beginning a million times.
Yeah,
the middle of it, a few times. The end of it, I've probably only seen like twice. But I would always start it and then get busy or whatever. But I enjoyed that first one. I just missed it when the second one was in theaters.
One, two, it came out like in theaters the same month as Dark Knight in 2008, so I think that kind of buried its box office. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what they do with it, but the trailer itself did not make me excited.
Watched it on my phone and immediately went to, I think I was on YouTube, immediately went to see what the dislikes were, because I just thought, oh, that's, whatever. And
the ratio wasn't going to be good.
At the time, it was 20,000 likes and roughly 5,000 dislikes.
Yeah,
already, and that was like within being up for like 2 hours.
Well, at least it's not like that YouTube rewind video with Will Smith where it has like 10 million dislikes and 9 million likes or something. But
I've also heard people complaining that it looks really cheap or low budget. But again, I watched it on my phone, so I was just like,
I could
whatever.
also see that Del Toro's vision for a Hellboy 3 was like $100 million movie, and they wanted to make a $50 million movie or a $40 million movie. Like, I could see that too. But yeah,
I have no dog in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, like I like those Del Toro movies, but I like him as a filmmaker more than the property.
Yeah.
So, I would really just want to see him make at Mountains of Madness. That's what I want to see him make, but because that was initially something that was pretty close to happening a few years ago before it fell apart. Because he released like the one tweet of all the screenplays that he had finished and never made a movie based on.
Oh,
there's a bunch of stuff. And at Mountains of Madness is the one I really want to see him go back
Jordan
to.
Peele's Monkey Paw. He just hit cement on 10 scripts.
But yeah, so
first page is the budget he needs, and then there's a script.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was some other news, but like those big trailers are things you can go out and watch now. Like I said, the Us trailer. By the time this podcast comes out, you can go watch it, or you should be able to soon. So we can briefly touch on things we've been watching that are out there. Before we get to New Year's Evil. So You Might Be the Killer is a movie that you can watch on Shudder, and I think you can probably rent it in other VOD places or things like that. It's got Franz Kranz in it and what's her name? I'm forgetting.
Allison Hannigan?
Allison Hannigan, who is on the American Pie movies. She was Willow on Buffy. She was in How I Met Your Mother. So I think like How I Met Your Mother, like the money that she would have made for being on that show for that many years and its syndication deals and stuff, she's probably doesn't have to do much movie work. And it seems like this movie may have been more of a favor deal because it seems like most of her scenes are probably shot separate after the fact. Like I could imagine like her parts of this movie having been filmed in like 1 or 2 days in LA.
Oh yeah.
Like just as a favor to the filmmaker or some of the other actors in it or something if she was friends with any of them. But yeah, so You Might Be the Killer. It's a movie where Franz Kranz, so he was the stoner character in Cabin in the Woods, and he's been in some like other stuff, but it's basically like he's at a camp, like a summer camp with like adult counselors and stuff, and there's a killer killing people, and he's been having blackouts and doesn't remember what happened, and he doesn't know if he's the one that's killing people or not, and he's got to figure that out and survive. And it's kind of like the subversion of tropes movies, so I'd say tonally it's not as, well, it's still quote unquote high concept for like a horror movie. I would say that maybe Final Girls is a comparable movie, but Final Girls is more heavily comedy based, or at least was more sold on comedy, and it was PG-13, and it had a little bit more of like an emotional core to the movie. As opposed to you might be the killer is just like, do you like the lead character? Do you like that actor? If so, then you'll probably enjoy the movie.
Which I really do.
Yeah, and I thought like I've enjoyed most things I've seen him in. So it's like if you enjoy him as an actor, then you're kind of bought into it. But there's really not an emotional core or stakes so much where you're like, oh no, what's gonna happen to this guy?
Yeah, I was messaging you guys about it because I really like the way that film starts. Then it kind of spins its wheels, and then I just forgot to finish it. If that tells you anything.
Yeah. Like, so I would say that, on Shudder, if you have that service, it's a good enough watch. It's one of those movies that I think was like a film festival movie that went to some festivals and got some buzz out of those. And then it got acquired by Shudder. And that's pretty much where I think it's ended. And it's one of those things that I think if it were to hit Netflix, because like Shudder is something that all these, horror podcasts are getting supported by for ads and stuff. We're not because we're supported by ourselves. We're self-funded. We have our own GoFundMe for ourselves. But it's the type of movie that I think caters to a horror audience. I don't think this is something you show to just your average. Because I think Final Girls is a little bit more broad. Like, oh, you remember Friday the 13th? These are kind of like a high-level greatest hits element in this movie of like those elements. Whereas this one felt like a little bit lower budgeted. Which, not micro budget. It had actual, it looked good. It sounded good. It had big actors in it who've been in other things. Well, your two leads, like Allison Hannigan and Franz Kranz, but everybody else is kind of more unknowns. But then, it was just kind of him running around. It's like, is he the killer? Is he not? I'm trying to remember what part of the movie where it really kind of gives you what the answers are. Because it's not you go into the third act and you have like a big M. Night Shyamalan type twist. Like
no, it's pretty early on.
Yeah, you know what the story is.
I think probably like 20 minutes in or so.
It's not even halfway.
And then after that, that's when I feel like I start spinning the wheels.
Well, because it does the thing where it tells the same scene, like as like somebody's death scene. You will see it from 4 angles. You will see like an initial angle, then a later angle. So it's like, do we really need to see the angles
and not
of this?
all at once. It's like
it's spread out. It might be a 20-minute gap between seeing how something really played out. And then some of that too was that to pad the running time. Was that so that they could milk the same like effect shots for a kill multiple times?
But some of the kills though, they actually don't really show much. There's a couple they show pretty good.
Yeah, there's a few where it shows what happens completely multiple times from different angles in detail, and there's some of them where it's more kind of off screen or kind of a smaller deal. It was an enjoyable enough movie like to sit there and watch it for like an hour and a half. I thought it was fine. I don't know that I would have paid to like purchase it, or if it's a movie that people would have really got out to the theaters for. But on a streaming service, I think it's the perfect type of movie for that. It's a movie that's not like a 10 out of 10. It's not Cabin in the Woods or on that level. It's more of like, a 6, 7 maybe. Kind of like a lower budget, lower scale. And it didn't really upend the tropes in any major way. It just gave you a different approach to one of those movies. It wasn't like deconstructing the genre. It was just saying, what if instead of it being a kid that drowned in the lake and comes back as a man monster 30 years later, what if it's this? And then that's just kind of all it is. And enjoyable enough, but nothing that's like, oh, you must watch this.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, where are we at with slashers? It's either just, they've been deconstructed for...
since 1996.
And arguably before that.
94 with New Nightmare,
I think before that, too.
Yeah, possibly. Even Friday the 13th, Part 6.
But...
Jason Lives.
But for that long, and they just keep getting twisted. And it's interesting, but it's hard for them to
do much you haven't seen.
Yeah, and then the whole concept of deconstruction now is been done a lot. But then also there's a million just straightforward slashers. And we've had this conversation before, kind of. But it's just the hybrid is where things need to go to survive. I think
the hybrid.
If with a larger audience, and I'm not saying you have to have a larger audience, but for something that is, I think, feels fresh in 2018.
If you're dealing with, a summer camp, or you're dealing with, a mostly single location, like slasher killer with a mask, tracking people down and killing them, I think the general audience is, aside from like Halloween, so if you have like
so much to
if you have the nostalgia factor of Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis and all that stuff, then yeah, you can sell that. But I think almost anything else, you need like Happy Death Day did the high concept, like essentially like a slasher movie meets Groundhog's Day. And if you do like those high concept things, then yeah, you can. But I think deconstructing the genre of slasher as a whole is kind of done. I think just saying, here's a slasher mixed with this.
Yeah.
You know, here's Back to the Future mixed with the slasher, where you're trying to go back and save your dad from dying or something. Wasn't that a Dennis Quaid movie or something?
I don't know.
There's a movie
Edge of Tomorrow also is basically.
Yeah. But there's a movie, I think it was Dennis Quaid, where he's like talking on a radio to his dad like 30 years in the past, trying to save his mom from dying or something. I don't remember what that was. That wasn't like a horror movie. That was more like a thriller, but yeah, so You Might Be the Killers out there. You know, it's a decent enough, fun movie if you like slashers and want something that's kind of lighthearted.
Some people just want slashers, and that's totally fine too. But you know,
yeah,
everything doesn't have to be deconstruction.
Let's see, Into the Spider-Verse or Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse animated film. I thought that was amazing. That, and you know, in a way, kind of deconstructed the superhero myth and like the origin stories and element of all those movies. It kind of like showed that, and like it kind of deconstructed things. It was very, very smart, and it wasn't on a lot of people's radars because it's an animated film. But like, you know, if you're even if you're not into superhero movies, I could see a lot of people who did not like the Marvel cinematic movies or DC ones and go into this one and come out enjoying it because it's so over the top. To make this as a live action movie would be like a $500 million movie just for the amount of effects and stuff on screen. Or maybe not. I mean, $200 million at least, but...
Well, you know, you just do different stuff visually with the CGI. You know, the closest thing to this is like Scott Pilgrim, which doesn't even come close to approaching, you know...
Yeah, because Scott Pilgrim was still like a movie that cost a lot of money for what it was.
But yeah, but as far as the visual flair and everything, like, yeah, that film feels a lot more vanilla, even though that is like one of the wildest visually live action films, you know, you can maybe watch.
Yeah.
Compared to this is just bonkers.
And Spider-Verse has a very stacked cast. Some of it's a little bit of a spoiler, but I won't spoil that. But you know, you have like Jake Johnson, who's like Peter Parker. You have like Lily Tomlin's in it.
Yeah.
So like even Catherine Hahn, like some of these voices, like I know these voices, and then it's like, oh no, because I didn't really do much research
Chris
afterwards.
Pine.
Yeah, so there's Chris Pine and
John Mulaney.
Yeah, John Mulaney, Haley Steinfeld, Mahershala Ali. Who else? Nicolas Cage, of course. Liev Schreiber. So there's all kinds of people that are in here in these different roles. And I just loved it from beginning to end. I thought it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was like one of the best superhero things in a long time. It kind of just got the essence of Spider-Man as a character and then the overall message. So somebody pointed out the Into the Spider-Verse and Last Jedi have a lot of similarities, but one of them handled it in a way that people loved because I think it was more organic to the story and it wasn't as much calling attention to the fact that here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to spoil what that is, but like as opposed, and I think that like without spoiling, I think there's some elements for Into the Spider-Verse, the way it ended that story. If Star Wars had ended in a similar way, people would have been happy with it. But I think it was very organic to the story they were telling. It made a lot of sense because like the version of Peter Parker they show in Spider-Verse is like not the one you typically see. Because most of the movies are an origin story, and then maybe he gets to be in story, like in the movies 22, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I think in the Raimi movies he was still supposed to be like 20 because Spider-Man 3 took place a few months after Spider-Man 2, and that wasn't so he was. You know, he was probably no older than 21. And then the Andrew Garfield ones, he was still young too. So, and then in the MCU right now, he's like 15, 16. So in this one, you get to see a Peter Parker who's older, who's been Spider-Man for like 20 years or something. So I think that is just a different version of that character and does kind of show you what you typically don't see in these movies because they don't go on long enough. And even like in the Batman movie where they have Ben Affleck try to be old Batman, he's still not that old, and they haven't really made that an element of the movies too much. But yes, I really enjoyed it. I thought the visuals were great. Like it took a second to get used to it.
Did you see it in 3D?
No.
I really want it to.
I forgot, and I just got whatever the screening was.
I had to see it in the morning, and I saw that was the only thing I had to. Yeah, because I couldn't see it in 3D because they didn't have any 3D ones.
I was constrained by the time of day to see it.
Me too.
The animation style, like the kind of things being focused and out of focus, like in the foreground and background, because usually in animated films, just everything's in focus, and there's really just like you see the characters. They don't usually do like the depth of field stuff with those movies where your characters in the foreground, the background's blurred out like it would be in traditional film. But this movie did some of that stuff, and it took a little bit to get used to how they did that. But once you got into it, then it was fine. I know some people, whatever, with like some motion stuff, some people like have motion sickness or don't like it. But I think that's like video games. That's with 3D. That's with anything. So some people just sucks if you're sensitive to motion. But like once I got into it, I was like this. I think Sony is now trying to copyright the animation style they use because it's like innovative and interesting and could be used for other movies. They use
part like I don't know if it gets smoother as it goes on because he is becoming I don't know. We'll just say people are more confident in being Spider-Man by the end of this movie. I don't know if it gets smoother or if I paid attention, but like it seems like their frame rate is not typically it's 24.
It's a little choppy.
It's a little choppy, slower. Which is what they do in the Lego movies kind of as well.
Yeah.
But also it does like a great and it works for this, and they do a great blend of like realistic CGI at times
with comic imagery.
Yeah, with comic imagery, and then also some just what appears to be 2D animation. Like it's an awesome blend of styles that really just flow into one another, and it just makes for a CGI movie. CGI movies can look really beautiful. I always prefer hand animation.
Yeah,
but this is a nice. This is at least feels more.
It felt innovative.
More, it has more of an artistic stamp than something that just looks like a traditional 2D animated thing modeled in 3D, like a Pixar. Love Pixar. The stuff looks great and phenomenal, but sometimes it looks like, okay, how do we up-res a 2D animated movie and make it look 3D? This is how we do it. We add shadows, all that. It looks beautiful. But this is like a whole like artistic style that has to come from a specific vision and not just from like a, you know what I mean? Like, just like a building off of what a studio's done before or something.
Yeah, this was like
all the Pixar films mostly look like, we made Toy Story. Now let's make one that looks better than that. Since then,
each of their movies has a different specific look for the way the characters are animated, like Up versus Incredibles.
Yes.
But Into the Spider-Verse, like, just was like its own look that, like, I think all the movies they make for this series or spinoffs or stuff will probably maintain that. I just thought it was an amazing movie. If you have kids, I'm not sure how young you can go because there is a little bit more adult material.
There's some deaths.
Yeah, I mean, like good guys, bad guys, whatever. There's some stuff that goes on.
People get shot with guns.
Yeah, like maybe like a 3-year-old might be too young. I don't know.
I think it's hard to take a 3-year-old to the theaters anyway.
Yeah, like because I've heard people say they took their 5-year-olds and they enjoyed it.
But I've heard some people say that their 5-year-olds do not like death. They said, I remember hearing somebody say, like, if they go see a Disney movie, they have to know if a parent's died because if a parent dies in the film, they say it really bothers the kid. Like, you know what I mean? So I think you probably know your kid because it's nothing too grim, but it's not all sugar coated.
Yeah, so I just really enjoyed it a lot. I think like kids, probably from the ages like 7 on up will probably really get it and enjoy it. And like when I was a kid, if that was that, I would have loved the hell out of it. But yeah, it's like I enjoyed that a lot. At the top, like it's probably my top super movie of the year. Like even over going back and thinking about like Infinity War. I mean, that's a different thing because it's a culmination of all these years and all these characters. But I still really enjoyed this one a lot, and I'll definitely want to buy this one on video. I know Derek saw it and enjoyed it a lot as well. So it's probably the best Spider-Man movie. And speaking of Spider-Man, the video game for PS4 finally got the suit from the Sam Raimi movies, which is like a big online controversy apparently.
They should have never done it.
Well, they apparently planned it out months ago and just had to keep quiet and endure the harassment of people like saying, I bought this game. I deserve everything I want in it. So,
yeah, I'll say this too. I also really liked the Spider-Man movie. I thought it was awesome. And two, if they do a sequel, I love the visual style, but man, and it's so much work, but I would love it if there was a different visual style for the next one. Not because I don't like this one, just because that was part of the charm. Is you saw something that looks so different. I would like to see something that looks different again. I would be fine if they made some direct to video sequels or spin-offs of this that looked in that style.
Because I think that the idea is to do some of the characters spinning off in their own movies and then doing like future movies that are like the crossovers of the different Spider-Verses. I wouldn't be surprised if they refine the visual style for each like entry to kind of be more specific to what they're showing.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Because each universe, too, has their own style.
Yeah, because like there's Spider-Man Noir that's in black and white, and he's talking like, you biscuit muncher or something. Apparently they had some things he was saying, so Nicolas Cage, or some of the phrases he was uttering after the fact, they were like, oh, actually this sounds kind of dirty. Oh, nope, that's a sex act. So they took it out. Apparently they had to re-record some dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, I also love the film too. I don't know where it lands on me. It's, but also too, you know, a lot of praise about it, and I've like really liked it. But you know, talking about the Spider-Man game, I was just thinking, look, as much as I love the movie, and people are like, oh, it has such a good sensation of you know, it's not shot like any other Spider-Man movie.
Yeah,
and they can do different things, and they came with live action, obviously, but. That's why I love that Spider-Man game, because some of the cinematics in that does some things they don't do in live action. You know, I'm not saying they can't do it. At this point, we're getting pretty close to doing whatever.
Yeah.
But I love some of the cinematics in that game because they do just the shots, the way that they're directed.
Yeah.
You don't see that in a Spider-Man movie. But also, to me, as much as I love all that stuff, not talking about story, but the sensation or whatever, I don't think anything competes to actually playing a game swinging around a spider.
Yeah, because
you know
like,
what I mean?
After playing,
sensation.
After the game, I was like, when I went downtown for something, I was really depressed that I couldn't just web swing and jump up the building. It's like, man.
Yeah, like as cool as they'll make swinging be in any movie, it's not as fun as just controlling.
Well, and two, when you're playing the game and like your Spider-Man is like diving down between buildings, and then the controller starts rumbling more as he gets closer to the ground, and at the last second you swing off.
Like, yeah, like, you know, you can't beat that sensation.
When they get that,
I really, you know, if you're a big Spider-Man fan and you love all that stuff, I really recommend, if you have a PlayStation, to get that game. I'm sure you probably have already.
And if they ever get around to doing, like, if VR continues to improve and be more popular and be more embraced and more used, like VR for a Spider-Man game, if they figure out not how to make you throw up, it would be amazing.
You know, they have a free Spider-Man Homecoming VR experience.
I do.
I did that. It does not look good. It looked very low resolution. I think you basically stand on a thing and shoot web, and you may swing a little bit. I'm going to let you borrow my headset anyway, but you can download it for free.
Yeah, if it looks like the game,
no, it does not.
If it looks like the game in VR, that would be amazing.
It looks like a PS1 game.
Oh,
but like, in VR, and you're up on a roof, and you're like, oh my god, this is horrible.
Yeah, if it gets to the point where the graphics are at the level or above the level of the Spider-Man PS4 game, and it's in VR, that would be amazing to play that. I'm not even sure how the controls would work or how you would make that, but like that is years off.
Yeah, which they do have those games that are motion based, where you kind of like. Right, they might. I don't know if they do web sling, but I think they're like a zip line thing. There's a couple games on Steam like that for VR and stuff, so you could see it kind of getting there. Yeah,
let's see.
Especially if you made it a lower. If you did a graphical style that was more
blocky or
cell shaded or so,
flat.
You know, flat. Yeah.
Let's see. So then also real quick. So you watched The Favorite.
Yeah, that's what I saw. The Spider-Man, and then The Favorite, and
a double bill. You should not take your children to.
Yogors.
Lanthimos?
Lanthimos, who did, you know, The Lobster, Killing a Sacred Deer. Oh my gosh, what is that first film of his that I saw? Dogtooth. I'm growing into a bigger and bigger fan of his. And his films too, they're not something that I watch and I'm like, oh, that was like the most amazing thing ever. There's something that kind of wash over me over time sometimes. And part of the way through Favorite and just my emotions watching that, I expected to like The Favorite more. And halfway through it, I'm like, oh man, did I like that Spider-Man movie more than this halfway through? Which is not what I expected, even though just because of my personal taste, you know. But by the end of The Favorite, I was like, oh yeah, I like this movie a lot. I don't know where it lands. Killing Sacred Deer, I think I still prefer. But kind of that evening and even the next day, that movie was getting into my mind more and more. And I was even thinking about this more than Spider-Man. And I really love The Favorite. But also as I get older, I'm more interested into those kind of period films as well. Well, even though this is shot and performed differently. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not stuffy at all like that.
Yeah, because it's got Olivia Colman, Emma Stone, Rachel Weisz, Nicholas Hoult, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. And Olivia Colman, I was like, what do I remember her from? She was Doris in Hot Fuzz.
Yes. Yeah.
I was like, oh.
Yeah, and she's like somebody in Lobster too that works at the hotel.
It's nice seeing, because like I forget what people have said before. It's like a comedy director or a comedy actor. It's far easier for somebody that directed a comedy. It's what's the guy that did the new movie Vice? Forgetting his name. Not Ice Cube.
He did Anchorman. What is his name?
Adam McKay.
Yeah.
So it's far easier for Adam McKay to make a Scorsese movie, which he kind of did like Big Short. So it's easier for somebody that comes from the comedy world or does comedy to make something as dramatically impactful than it is for someone who's only doing dramatically impactful stuff to do comedy. So that's why I love when you see people like Zach Galifianakis or other people who do like, comedy getting like straight dramas and kill it.
Yeah.
And that has happened. Like Woody Harrelson was somebody that was from like Cheers and then went on to be like a dramatic actor. Yeah. So seeing somebody that my only recollection was them being a comedic character in Hot Fuzz, seeing them in like a serious movie.
Well, no, this isn't a serious movie.
Well,
it's very comedic.
Oh, well, I have not seen it.
Yeah,
yet,
it's a comedy. It's like
a serious-minded director.
It's not a broad comedy, but he has his own sense of humor. Did you see The Lobster?
Saw Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Did you? So you did not see The Lobster?
I have not seen it
because that
yet.
is very funny. Because it's it has
Colin Farrell and Rachel Weisz.
Well, who else? Who bounces back between comedy and drama? Why can't I think of his name? Steve Brule, Dr. Steve Brule.
I'm blanking here. Let's see.
Why can't I think of his name? It's not coming up on The Lobster?
Yeah, so this is the cast.
Oh my God. I know people are screaming at us right now. John C. Reilly.
Oh.
John C. Reilly.
He's towards the end of the...
John C. Reilly is like Colin Farrell's friend in there. And that is a very weird... Because, the whole movie, the whole premise of that is if you don't find love, basically, you go to this hotel, and if you don't find it within a certain amount of time, you turn into like an animal.
Yeah.
So he picks a lobster to turn into. So like it's a that's kind of a comedy too. So this director does his a twisted about
dark comedy, but
a little bit
more serious
kind of a twisted sense of humor.
His Killing of a Sacred Deer was like very serious,
but it also was
there was some
funny.
dark humor.
Yes,
it wasn't anything that was somebody saying a funny joke. It was just the situation being so dark and things coming out of it that would be humorous. And that's something that doesn't really catch on with the mainstream audience.
So this is this is definitely comedic. It's not a broad comedy, like I said, but her character basically. It's centered around three women, and they're
like the queen or whatever, and two people trying to weasel their way to be like their confidant.
Yes. So she is somebody obviously that they are both trying to say impress, but it is not like Rachel Weisz. It's not like she's just like bowing down to her, or even Emma Stone, anything like that. Like Rachel Weisz, they try to have a mutual relationship, even as far as like respecting each other on some level, but also. They both get something out of a relationship, just like in any other relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, her character is very. Even as the film opens, this is I think in the trailer, so not really a spoiler, but she's showing Rachel Weisz this big. I don't want to say castle, but this big. Let's just say a castle that she's building for her or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh yeah, I'm. How do you like it? This is going to be my gift to you. And she's like, well, do you think this is right to be spending this much money on this? She's like, well, why? She's like, well, because, the war's still going on. She's like, the war's still going on?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah. She's like, oh, well, I didn't know that. She's so like it is a very comedic film because her character is just, she's oblivious, but also she's the one in power. There's been people that have drawn parallels to, say, Donald Trump, you know what I mean?
Or any president.
Yeah, but it's not exactly, this is not written for that. This was written a long time ago, and this is based on actual history. Of course, there's big liberties taken with it.
Yeah.
But I think the inspiration came out of those three women. They are, a lot of things change for a lot of people based on the politics of those three women.
Yeah.
You know, because that queen had so much power. Maybe one woman wants something because she felt strongly that the country should, you know, maybe stay at war or make a peace treaty. Emma Stone has her own agenda for things based on some things she has going on. So the characters are all really well written. And it's been pointed out that there's not a lot of films where there's 3 well-written roles for females.
Yeah.
And you got these amazing actresses too. Like it's very entertaining. I'm not saying that's why the film's good. But as I get older, I'm getting more and more interested in history and I don't know. I loved, oh my gosh, why am I drawing Paul Thomas Anderson's film? The Phantom Thread, you know, that was set in London in the 1950s or whatever. But for some reason, as I get older, I get more interested in that stuff too.
Yeah.
But this is shot, their dialogue is paced differently. They use somewhat modern language, but it's nothing that hits you over the head. It feels natural in it. You know, it doesn't feel.
They're not saying hashtag Queen
Yeah,
Boss.
it's not like that at all. But it also does not feel too stuffy to where you feel alienated from it. I think I think it's a good in between because it feels natural. And if you didn't even think about it, you wouldn't even realize.
Yeah.
And it's nothing that hits you over the head, but he also shoots it much differently than those films have been shot before.
Yeah, it's wide angle lenses, and natural light.
So I again walked out of the theater. I was like, yeah, I like that quite a bit. But as I thought about it, it got into my head more and more. And that's the film I started like looking up stuff about and trying to listen to podcasts on. And interviews and stuff because I really, really did enjoy it. But again, love Spider-Man too. So that was a good day for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely recommend it. Both of those.
Favorite, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, but you know.
Yep. So now we can move into our discussion of New Year's Evil, which is a vastly different type of film. It's from 1980, and as the name implies, it's based around the holiday of New Year's. We'll do spoilers throughout because this one there's not like huge spoilers. So this was on Amazon Prime to watch, and you can buy it from whatever format or place you want. So the base,
we can keep maybe the revelation towards the end of it.
Yeah,
but yeah,
just so you know, we will not spoil the very end of the movie till we get to the discussion at the very end.
Yeah, because what goes on there, it doesn't matter if it's.
Yeah, I mean, it's like these movies, the twist doesn't matter because it's not it's characters you have. It's not characters you have a mythology of or have prior movies of. So it's not like if there was a twist in Halloween 2 about Laurie Strode and Michael Myers or something, because it's characters you're introduced to, not really given a lot of characterization or really like them in any direction. You're just introduced to characters, and then you figure out stuff at the end, like. To use at the minute, like when I was watching this, I hadn't seen this movie before, and I was watching this this Friday, and I was actually working from home. And it was when I was like at the end of the day when I was done, and I was really tired because I didn't get to bed early the night before, and then I fell asleep a little bit and had to wake it up. When I woke up, I was like, oh shit, I slept for like 15 minutes. So I had to go back and rewind 20 minutes and watch it over. And then I was like, oh, I remember some of this when I was asleep hearing it. But yeah, so the basic plot synopsis: during a New Year's Eve celebration, a Los Angeles disc jockey receives a phone call saying that when New Year's strikes in each time zone, someone will be murdered, and she will be the last one. So not a bad setup. The idea of thinking about it, to give these different time zones. So in this, the character isn't spanning the globe and traveling to each time zone. They're not going from...
My wife came in part of the way through, and she was like, how is he getting into each time zone? I'm like, no, he's like in the same city.
Because when I was watching it, and I like Julie was watching part of it in the other room, because like she's like the big wide open like dining room attached to the living room. So she was in the dining room. She's like, wait, what's going on? She's like, how's he getting from like LA to Chicago? I was like, no. He's in LA or wherever and just killing people each hour on the hour.
They're just showing them. They're just broadcasting like they always do when you watch.
So it's like a New Year's show where one of your main characters is like an MC and
very punk flavor too. She's kind of a punk MC, and it's an all punk crowd. Which
Diane Sullivan is Roz Kelly is Diane Sullivan. And because like when Julie's like, oh, looking like the hair's all teased out, they have like the makeup like on the cheekbones, and then the outfit that's very like early 80s, late 70s like punk. And then this movie throughout has a lot of musical performances. And then, Julie's like, why do they have so much music in it? I was like, one, it's probably to pad out the running time. But having music can make your movies a legal nightmare, depending on the rights you get to songs to like have it. I mean, it's a little bit different from movies
I don't know
and TV
what songs
shows.
if they had any songs that were...
They had real songs in it.
Yeah.
because there were some of them I recognized,
but none were like
none of them were like were the Ramones or something like that, or the
Clash,
Blitzkrieg Pop or stuff like that. But it was a few like actual songs, and then just a lot of musical numbers.
Well, and two, a lot of films, even later than that though, they people go to the theater, especially drive-ins and stuff. Like they would put plenty of music in there because people would just enjoy it. Films were differently paced.
One, two, like I think that in today's world, so like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse had some more like hip hop in it.
Yeah,
and then it had other music mixed in too. Because somebody's doing a comparison of like the Spider-Man movie from 2002 soundtrack to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So we got Nickelback and Saliva with Chad Kroeger and the guy from Saliva singing Hero or whatever. And then you got this other movie that's got a more diverse lineup of music. But but yeah, there are movies that have been, like the idea that you have like a DJ or like a popular person who's hosting a New Year's Eve show and they have music in between the TV segments, that does make some level of sense. And that's the type of thing that does actually exist. Because the idea was they have this show and she's hosting it, and as it turns New Year's on each time zone, they're doing like a check-in every hour and counting it down. And then they get a phone call from a guy using a voice changer that says he's going to kill somebody at midnight, every hour.
What's his name again? What does he say his name is?
Evil. He just says, yeah.
And he says, I saw the trivia, I didn't realize, but he said, sounds like the Phantom, which they said was a reference to Phantom of Paradise, because that's how the Phantom's voice sounds whenever he becomes the Phantom in that film.
So then, like, too, as he kills people, he records audio of it and then calls her back, and then play, like, on the phone will play the audio so she can hear it. And so, like, his sole-minded focus is to find women to kill at midnight. Or, like, as it turns midnight in each time, for each time zone. So, like, if you're in LA, at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and midnight, you can do that, which is what the movie does. And, like, interesting enough, like, concept, like I said, like, the setup's not bad, but it's very of the time, 1980, so this is post-Halloween, but pre all of the knockoff movies after that. Because I'm not sure if it came out before.
And this is post some of the, the Italian films that also inspired some slashers or stuff. Like, I'm assuming Bay of Blood was that late 60s, early 70s. I don't know. There was plenty of films. It's hard to know what was inspiration for this, but.
Well, it was released in December of 1980, so after Friday the 13th and some of the other movies that it came out.
But also, too, it was in production. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would have been production before Friday the 13th, or like similar time frames. Like, so it wasn't ripping off Friday the 13th, and like the setup almost felt like Siskel and Ebert gave it like pretty bad review, and they said it felt like a thriller that would have been made pre-1978, so pre-Halloween. It felt like a thriller that would have been made with slasher elements grafted on.
It's funny that they call this film dated when, even now, so many films are just find some simple, independent films, slasher films. Like, it's like, oh, this concept's dated. Yeah. It was dated in 1980, but yet we still have an audience for these types of films.
And two, like, a difference I would say between, say, this and your Friday the 13th or something, like, I don't think it really bears much resemblance to those, because you see the killer's face.
Yeah.
And you hear him talk.
Well, also, too, I think that's what's better. I'm not saying it's a better film than those, but I like that we saw the killer, because that is the more interesting part of this film.
If he was just wearing, like, there's parts where he wears a mask, but it's after you've already seen his face.
Yeah.
If that was the entire movie, it would have been really flat.
Well, this, again, I almost wanted to see more of him. We get to see her and all the drama of her being scared, and then the police come in and help her, and they're prejudiced against punks and all this stuff. It's a weird movie that it seemed like it was almost trying to target the punk audience, because it does play so much fan service to the music and everything,
and the wardrobe,
But yeah, we get to see so much of him that it really reminded me of Stuntman Mike from Death Proof, because you got to see the way he played this game with all of his victims. He would play a role,
and it's similar, like, not completely the same, but similar, like, disdain for women.
Yes, yeah.
And
that's what I liked about it. and I had watched it previously, but I couldn't really remember much from it.
Yeah,
I just remember I was like, there's something I liked about it, and that's what it was.
Well, because you get the moments of him like being the smooth talking guy that's trying to get them, to let their guard down and go along, and then the switch flips like, okay, now it's time to kill you, and so that is like an interesting thing, and that did set up, movies that came. I don't think it set people up, but it was like a storyline that, a lot of those slashers were very bad to female characters aside from the final girl, and there was no real justification. It was just the way the story worked, that a guy might get stabbed through the neck, but the woman's the one that gets the brutal murder. In some of those movies, not all of them, just some of them. Like in this movie, the character explicitly states like, I hate women.
Yeah
So there's a difference there, and it's one of those things where like when I was watching, like once the movie ended, like Julie's like, well, that might not be so great for people to watch these days, because some people are like, this guy's got a point.
Well, also too, his wife was is very twisted as well. Once he, if you assume that everything he said was true, I'm not saying justification, but at least his disdain towards her.
Yeah. Well, and two, it's just like, it's a movie where...
Well, there's spoilers for the end right there.
Well, but yeah, without telling you, like, I mean, it doesn't tell you who that is or whatever, but just like the different elements of, him like realizing in this situation, he's got to be able to do this by midnight to continue his trend. So he's in a situation trying to figure out how to set up what he wants to do in 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's entertaining as well.
Because that's almost like a Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah.
Like Ethan Hunt's sitting there, he's got 5 minutes to get the situation. So that element is kind of, he's going to kill like some women, but like who are innocent for no reason. But that is like an entertaining element of.
Because too, you're like, if they would have rung that for more than what it's worth, you could have been implicated and gone along with him. Like, oh, how's he going to kill this woman right at midnight when it strikes midnight in like Chicago or whatever? Because he does get in situations where he gets sidetracked. Like he starts out on schedule, and then of course, as you know, things start getting sidetracked, and then he's like in a hurry.
If it showed more like, if there was, because the movie itself doesn't really show you clocks, and it doesn't like, he'll say like his character would indicate like there's not much time left. But if you were seeing like the clock and him like starting to sweat and all this stuff, then there's more dramatic tension.
Yeah.
As it is, it's mostly just him being like, I have to be there by 10, I have to be there by 11.
Yeah, the one time he mentions like, oh, we're not going to be there by 10,
Yeah, and then
he gets the woman to go inside the liquor store. And
yeah, so there's just like, if they, played it out a little bit more, then it's more entertaining. And then, of course, there's the element like where he runs into people not related to what he's doing that he has to deal with. It's kind of a little bit fun because it like varies up what's going on a little bit. And there's the element throughout the movie, he's changing wardrobe and costume, and
my favorite's whenever he puts on the mustache and he acts like that's the stuntman Mike thing there. And
or kind of like a Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, so he goes into the bar and he picks up a woman, but then she says, "Oh, my roommate's going to come. You wouldn't want me go alone, would you?" And then
he's
she
like,
is just,
the more the merrier.
She is just talking his ear off in the car, and he's like, "What did I get myself into?" Like, that's not something you typically see in slasher films where the killer is so annoyed. Yeah.
Because usually it's just like the silently stalking killer. You don't actually get much where you see the killer interacting with the victims or potential victims.
You don't get their personality. Like, I think he's the best actor in the film.
Yeah, because he's pulling off a pretty varied performance of. And the mustache looks so fake.
Yes.
Like sitting there watching it now in HD. Like,
well, Nicole thought she noticed that when there's a scene where he's putting the glue on and he's putting on it. She said, I think he's done this scene several times because she thought she could see glue on his upper lip too.
That makes sense. Reshoot it as many times. Like, so you have the element of like him kind of like almost Mission Impossible, like throwing on costumes and stuff to try to dupe people. So those elements are fun. And I think if it had leaned more into that, then it could have been a little bit better movie. Like maybe more of that and less of the punk performances would have balanced things out a little bit more. And at least the punk stuff, at least, that does date it, but at least it also just gives it a feel of a time.
I think it definitely helps the film,
because
it gives it some sort of personality, some sort of angle where it isn't just,
well, and two, the other
vanilla
something else that, thankfully they shot that movie on decent film stock and there's good transfers of it. So you watch it today, it still looks good because some of those movies you watched,
Prom Night.
was like Terror Train.
Yeah, Terror Train and Prom Night, from what I
some
remember.
Some bad transfers.
Terrible.
And
Jamie Lee Curtis.
there are better transfers of them available from different like resellers or whoever, but
distributors.
Yeah, but there are some better transfers. But the one that were on the streaming services were bad. I think Prom Night was like a 4x3
VHS rip.
Yeah, so not good. So in terms of like what you can easily find if you're not like a film like fan of those franchises or movies, like this movie still looks good. And like Prom Night, the first one, the transfer just looked bad. Terror Train looked bad. Wasn't Terror Train set on New Year's Eve too?
Yes, Terror Train was.
So that was another New Year's Eve one. But this movie feels a bit more wide ranging. It's not locked into a single location, so likely had a bigger budget. And then there's, like I said, there's like the costume changes and some of the crazy stuff going on. And at some point there's like a little mini shootout, and there's stuff with like elevators. So there's more stuff going on. It doesn't feel as constrained to a
Mission Impossible type elevator scene.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it doesn't feel as constrained.
De Palma may have been a fan of this, just like since they bring up the connection to Phantom of the Paradise, which is the De Palma rock opera musical, which is also a rock musical. Maybe there was some relationship there.
Well, like I was watching this movie because we had just done Body Double not too long ago. And it's like this movie almost felt more in the vein of Body Double than Friday the 13th or something.
Yes, yeah.
And I think this movie with a few tweaks could have been tilted more in that direction to be a more broad, easily more rewatchable movie.
Yeah, like I think there's something there there's something here, the structure of this that could be made into a pretty entertaining film, even nowadays. Like, I think you could update it totally
because just the idea of a killer who, as it strikes midnight in each time zone is killing somebody.
And we get to see the killer in their perspective, and it's not just a black glove.
And then you set up, so like once you get the basic setup, because you can play fast and loose with time and how all that works.
Yeah.
But once you get into like the last 10 minutes around each hour, then you can have some like kind of juicy segments of how are they going to get these, all the chess pieces set up on the board to fall the way they want. Like that could be really entertaining. So that element of the movie I thought was pretty clever, but they didn't lean into that as much.
Why don't they do Jigsaw's rocking New Year's Eve? And it's just, I'm trying to set up traps all around town that each go off at midnight.
Yeah, well, talking about Saw, something I was going to make a short film out of, I just never got around to it. And at this point, there's so much other stuff going on, I don't think I will. I thought that'd be funny, was to make fun of how those movies are a little bit dated now and like the concept. Have like somebody chained up in the basement and they like hear the recordings like you have 1 hour to live. There's a saw, you can saw your foot off. There's poison coursing through your veins. Your cell phone is just out of reach.
Oh yes.
So then the person would just like say, "Hey Siri," and then the phone's like, "Hello," and then they actually make sure my phone's not picking up. Say, "Call 911," and then like 911 comes and gets them. And then Jigsaw's like, well, shit, I didn't know that technology existed.
Well, just like the Home Alone, they do Home Alone ads
with Macaulay Culkin.
Google Home. You could see them easily just making a ad and just reshooting part of that. You know what I mean? Just reshooting part of that and having that as a Siri thing.
Yeah, because like the entire joke would just be Jigs. Like those movies are 15 years old and they're a little bit, that concept is a little bit, past its prime. So they haven't kept up with trends or technology to know that you could just use voice commands to get your cell phone to work like that. I thought that'd be funny, but I never got around to it because other stuff came up and it's like, But like this movie, like New Year's Evil, you could do a few tweaks. You could reimagine this for the current day. And the fact that the character is a man who hates women, I mean, I think that sadly is a thing that still heavily exists, and the plot point would probably almost be more relevant today than 1980. Because it's more of a specific thing, especially with internet comments. Because you can see, somebody make a statement that's kind of about nothing to do with that type of issue, and then somebody goes on there, well, blah, blah, blah. Because I've seen that happen and devolve pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing with this, too. You don't really get a sense that he hates women other than he's killing them. You know what I mean? Like, that's another thing, too. They don't really build it in. I'm not saying they have to build it in, but it is, again, just like, say, Terror Train. You just get the justification at the very end of it, which is also a little weak.
Well, and two, like, at least with, like, Terror Train, this isn't having, like, a weird cross-dressing twist or something. This is more straightforward.
Yeah.
The only thing...
And I guess it does leave some breadcrumbs, but not much,
Well, watching this movie, like I said, without spending a significant amount of time building up the characters before you get into the movie, you don't have a lot to go on, and some of the characters' ages and stuff was what was confusing me a little bit. It's like, well, how old are they supposed to be based on how these, when you get kind of like the quote unquote twist at the end, I was like, oh, I went and looked it up to see what the age difference was between some of the actors. Like, oh, it's only like 15, 16 years. Like, well, I mean, here's the thing. Most people can play like 5 to 10 years up or down in most directions. So usually that's fine. Like, was because Sean Connery was Harrison Ford's dad in Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. And, you know, if he plays up about 10 years and Harrison Ford plays down a few, then it works. Because I think they're like 13 years different. Because there's been, like, was on Halloween, like Jamie Lee Curtis, like, the age difference between her and Judy Greer wasn't that great. But if you play up and down a little bit, then it works. But this movie kind of requires a little bit of that kind of suspension of disbelief a little bit when it gets to the twist. And two, just like, you know, like the cops are in it and they're semi-competent, semi-incompetent. They're not the cops who ignore every sign that is possibly given to them. And like, oh, even though somebody's dead and missing, we got this phone call, we're just going to keep going with things. They actually do like lock down the building, provide protection, and try to figure it out.
And that always makes it more interesting too when, say, the villain is smart, but also his adversaries are smart, because you feel like, okay, there's some work done. It feels justified. You know, just like he lures the one cop and then beats him over the head with a brick, you know.
Well, and two,
to get in.
Like,
and then they notice, hey, how did you get in here? And they get very suspicious very fast.
Because, like, you know, Home Alone, I was listening to this, the Thunder Grunt podcast. They broke down the script of Home Alone. Like, so that movie has a bunch of setups, like 10 plus setups in the first 13 minutes of the movie, and pays all of them off in the second and third act. It, you know, a lot of it in the third act. It has, when you think about the bad guys like Harry and Marv, like their plan is actually pretty good. To go around before the holidays posing as a cop to get a scan of what all the neighborhood security is and what their plans are. And then when, you know, people are out of town on vacation, to go in and do that quietly and make sure the power is out and stuff, or the phones and stuff, like not a bad plan at all. And then that makes Kevin actually outsmarting them with his traps and stuff all the more satisfying, because like, these criminals already have a pretty good plan, and then he's able to outdo them. And
you got to have a good push and pull, otherwise there's no exciting drama in there. I'm like, I got 10 more minutes of that one I'm listening to as well.
Yeah, because like, so Home Alone is something you, like, you know, it kind of got panned by a lot of people critically and stuff.
I don't understand why.
But I think it's because if you watch the movie, the stuff that Kevin does to the burglars, like, they would be dead. They would not have lived through.
Yeah, but also it's
But I think it's that it was kind of mass market fare that made way more money than anyone thought.
So people were kind of...
So they were kind of dismissive of it because, you know, a long time, like, you know, until more recently, if, you know, like, I remember people being upset Dark Knight didn't get a Best Picture nomination in 2008 or 2009 or whenever the Oscars were. Because for a long time, like, a lot of critics kind of turned their nose at mass market fare, aside from, like, adult thrillers that happen to also then be successful, like Silence of the Lambs. But a lot of stuff, because, you know, like Silence of the Lambs and Home Alone going up against each other, like, the critics are like, oh, one's like, you know, a cinematic masterpiece, and this one's kind of this mass market kids movie. But then you look at Home Alone, and it's like it sets up and pays off so much stuff and moves pretty perfectly and has all these things. So that's like a movie that I want to go back and rewatch after thinking about all that. And it's got that John Williams score that's amazing.
Yeah. I watched it like a couple weeks ago, and then I actually turned it on last night too.
Because something I thought
family's Christmas.
Because something I thought about like in the past year was watching the new Star Wars, like Rey's theme has a lot of Home Alone's theme in it with like some of the instrumentation they use, and re-listen to him, it's like there's a lot of similarities. But and it's John Williams, so he composed it all. But back to New Year's Evil, like having a bad guy that has this plan and cops that aren't completely incompetent as they typically are in horror films, does up the stakes a little bit at the end, because it's not
lazy writing that's just, we need to get him in the building, let's just get him there fast, you know?
Yeah, because like because it was like Black Christmas, like John Saxon and the cops, like they're not the best cops and they don't do a lot, but they're at least there. But like a lot of horror movies, the cops, like Nightmare on Elm Street, you know, a lot of the Halloween movies and stuff like that, the cops are pretty incompetent. In this one, at least, they're engaged.
Yeah,
and there's like the detective. And like they figure out pretty quickly, it's like, wait a minute, how'd that person get in?
Yeah,
and then they quickly
very suspicious
go into lockdown mode and stuff. So
and I feel like, you know, the post 80s slashers, it made a lot of people think that they could be really lazy with some of the writing because they thought, the kids or whoever, they care about the kills in this. Let's just worry about that and that's it. You know what I mean? Like they knew they could get away with a lot if they just read the coattails of the gore and all that.
Well, and too, because even today, I see it a lot more with like low tier indie films.
Yeah, absolutely.
And mid-tier,
which is those people coming from that.
And upper tier films that are like bigger budget, like $1 million, $2 million stuff. A lot of people think that if I just hit like these like 4 big kill scenes and then have some TNA in it, then nobody's going to care about the plot consistencies or the acting.
And you could get away with that in the 80s because that stuff was fresher. Now we have an overabundance of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
so many gore scenes and boobs are not hard to find.
But what's funny though is like people still want that though, because like
they do,
because like the our short share
they do, but a smaller audience than it was in the 80s.
Because our short share got a bad review on Amazon Prime where somebody's like, oh, nothing even gory happened or something like that. Then I looked up some of that person's other reviews and they had like talked about like the Hatchet movies, how good the gore was, and it's like, well, I did not feel the need to spend $1,000 on gore for a short because that's not going to make more people watch it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just some gore hounds, and that's what they want. And that's that's totally fine. But some people, either they grow up as far as like maybe it was more appealing to them when it was younger, or it was something fresh, and then some people get over it and they want to move on. Some people don't. That's their thing. That's fine. But the audience will shrink.
Yeah, but like so this movie New Year's Evil, it has kills in it, but nothing like that grotesque or gory or that stands out. It's not like because I was watching some of Maniac the other night. It's not where somebody gets like a shotgun blast to the head and stuff.
Yeah.
And like Tom Savini wasn't doing the effects for this. This was, somebody gets stabbed or somebody gets a bag over the head or, gets suffocated or...
The suffocation scene is pretty good. And then I also love the follow-up when her friend he leaves the trail of the dumpster.
Yeah.
And then she opens it and he has the lighter and he's just looking at it.
Yeah, so there's some like fun, there's like more gags really in the gore. Because like looking back at like the review that like Siskel gave it, like his review makes you think that it's like this grotesque movie. Just imagine if he was still around to review Serbian film or something. Like they just wouldn't watch it. Yeah. Because the movie, even though there are kills, like none of it is really as gory as Friday the 13th or part 1 or 2 or whatever. Like it doesn't really approach those levels. It's more just like somebody getting stabbed or choked or whatever. And like even when somebody like gets jumped or thrown off the top of a roof of a building, it's not really that gory.
Yeah.
It's obviously like a dummy, and then you just see like the aftermath. So it's more the concept than like they have the kills sprinkled throughout, which may in 1980, I mean, probably more gory than the original Halloween because that really was more restraint shown in that movie than later ones because of the budget. But yeah, so it's not like you're going to sit here and see heads explode and like the burning with like the shears and like cutting fingers off.
I think what turns some people too is when you do follow along with the killer. I think that really kind of... I don't say you sympathize with the killer, but you are along with the ride. Yeah, and I think that can really turn people, and some people may not really vocalize why or maybe realize why. It turns them off more. But like, Angst, the film that was banned and everything, that film too, you follow the killer the entire time. And I think that was the reason why people really rejected that film, or as far as censors and everything. It's just something about it that people do not like. And again, like Death Proof, that has fun with it because also too, man, it's Kurt Russell. Yeah. And he's a stunt man. Like that's the coolest. Like that's the guy you want to be your best friend, but also he appears to be a little dopey. Like they, and that's what I loved about that film. It just really took its time and you got to just sit there
because you built up the mythology of how he, like the first part of that movie is kind of how he thought he was.
Yes.
And then the second half of the movie is how he actually was. Or at least how he was in an environment that didn't suit him exactly. Yeah. And I think because a lot of people think that they are the version of him from the first half of the movie. Yeah. Not with the killing people part, but just like the lady killer part or whatever. Yeah. But then the reality is they're more of the second part where he's just kind of creepy, stalkery dude that, if anybody doesn't completely fall into his trap. But like, so this.
I'm way more interested in films that get into the mind of, typically I am, unless it's a really good mystery, a mystery killer or something. Those are great. And then or films that get into the mind or the perspective of the killer more. I appreciate those more than just a group of kids who are getting slaughtered and they're running around scared. You know,
yeah.
me personally.
And another thing about this movie was it was adults. It was an adult going after adults. It wasn't teens.
Yeah.
Because like the teen slashers, whatever. There's some of them I like, some of them I don't. But I do think the idea of just a bunch of teens getting slaughtered by some 30 years later mental patient or whatever. So this movie does have an element of a mental institute to it, but it doesn't feature. It doesn't feature that heavily. But I do think that this was a trope for a while that every killer had been in a mental institution, and that may have been more of the. That was, I think, kind of like the urban legend pop culture element in that era. Before Halloween came out, the idea that there was an escaped, mental patient in your attic or whatever was more of the fear, as opposed to today, it's the people that have never been, well, there's some of the like mass shooters have had struggles of mental health, but a lot of them have never been admitted to facilities or never sought treatment. It was just untreated, undiagnosed people that through the internet, or whatever, were able to radicalize themselves or whatever it was they did. Like, I think that in today's world, it's more of the person that's never actually been in an institution is the one that you're afraid of, the person that has all these issues that they haven't addressed. And that's just, I think, just a difference in the era in terms of what people thought. And that's why I like the Halloween reboot was like when it had him in the facility and stuff. That was such like a jarring thing to some people because you don't see that much anymore.
Yeah.
Because like at this point, the killers, like Silence of the Lambs, like Buffalo Bill, like he wasn't in an institution. He had gotten, he had been to Dr. Lecter, at some point, but he wasn't, in an institution in and out. So I think, in that case, Lecter himself was a sociopathic murderer. So it wasn't like the person goes to an institution because something happened when they were 18 and they get out 20 years later or something, or they were a kid and get out 20 years later. Because I think even back in that era, that was like a worn out trope.
Yeah, that was just the easy.
And then that was in 1980. I mean, and how many movies between like 80 and 85 or whatever did that out of those like slasher knockoffs?
Yeah.
But yeah, so like,
they just needed a conceit and a reason to kill people.
Yeah, but this one, like, even if his reasons weren't super, laid out and all that, like the approach to it made it more novel. And sitting here right now, I just came up with an idea for like a feature or a short or something based on that idea. That's a different thing, but would be more relevant to the modern audience. So, like, I think there's a good core story there for New Year's Evil. I think that some of the elements, if they just leaned more into some things, would have been a lot more fun.
I also too, it's a very basic concept. Somebody gets killed. I think there's another like existential horror film to make about the marching forward time of death and being like, okay, death is unavoidable, and you almost do like a, it's an allegory for time going forward and dying, almost like a Final Destination where like, people keep dying because time and death is inevitable. Or
like say that somebody somehow is able to see death's plan and knew like exactly the hour and second that somebody's supposed to die. But the only caveat is if they were to kill someone else in the same area at the same time, that would satisfy the need and that person would continue to live.
Yeah, that's good.
So they could judge, ahead of time, is this person somebody we need in society? And if they thought that they were, then they would try to quickly find someone they thought that wasn't worth living to swap out.
Yeah.
So that's a concept. Don't steal it. TM right now. TM copyright. But yeah, so like I think the movie's concept is, and then like there's the part where he runs into the bikers.
Which is like a cool because it's an unexpected trouble for him, Yeah,
because he has his plane where he barely pulled off the one before, and he switches out costumes, and he's wearing like a priest costume, and then happens to run into bikers on accident, and then has to flee and escape that.
It's a bit like Hitman. He's pulling off these assassinations.
Yeah, well, and too, what's funny is like in real life, I knew somebody that went to was at a gas station, accidentally like bumped into a motorcycle or something, and then had like a gang of bikers surround them. Because here's the thing, like you're in traffic, and here it wasn't. I don't think Harleys and stuff like that. It was more like younger guys on sport bikes. But because that one gas station. So if you're in the Louisville area, there's this one speedway on Barstown Road, which is like the big strip where all the bars are in the town, or the like restaurant bar corridor.
Across from Wendy's?
Yes, and there's this one gas station that's kind of in the middle of that, and for a long time it was a huge hangout spot for like 30 dudes on like sport bike rice rockets. They would all gather there and hang out. And then this one of our friend's sisters was like, I think in traffic, and then for some reason like bumped into one of them in traffic on accident, because I think people just threw on their brakes quickly and stuff, and then like they fell over, and then her car is surrounded by 30 bikers, and we've seen in the news where that happens and people freak out and stuff. So that's something that is still kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Because like I had motorcycles for years, and like I had a sport bike. I didn't really ride it with other people. I mostly rode it by myself or with like 1 or 2 other people, because I wasn't into the riding in like 12 people. And I don't think there's 20 people I really like to spend that much time with consecutively anyway. Much less like dealing with traffic and all that stuff. And then people get really mad if you're like, if they have like this line of bikes in traffic, if you're in the middle lane, but they want to be in the middle lane, they go around you and want you to slow down and move out and stuff. It's like, it's very annoying. Don't do that. Because most people are stupid in traffic and or don't want to let 30 people get in front of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like that element was kind of fun. And then he has to go to like a drive-in to try to escape it. And it's like, man, there's not really many drive-ins anymore.
No, that's what, like this is a film is a fun time capsule, I think.
Yeah, from like the...
Again, seeing, just the punk stuff, the drive-in, all that, and also it being pre-slasher boom, but like right on the cusp of it.
The early element of it.
Yeah, right on the cusp of it, like, and to see how that affected probably the perspective on this film, and would this film have been made the same way 3 years later, if it was made 3 years later, or would they have said, oh no, we want to do something more like, more in the vein of Friday the 13th or something.
Yeah, like, because this movie, like, based on the production time, was likely being made around the same time as Friday the 13th. So I'm not sure if it was made before, after, whatever, but like if this had been made like a year or two later, it probably played a bit different, and the mask would have played more prominent role. But I think just seeing the killer, like I said, it puts you more in like a De Palma mode or, something of that era than the slasher.
Yeah.
But it has those like slasher kills, so I think that's why it kind of gets lumped in with those. But yeah, so I guess we can kind of wrap what our thoughts are and discuss like the twist stuff at the end just briefly after that.
Yeah, I mean...
Like, in terms of, like, a slasher, this was one that I wouldn't recommend just, like, if somebody doesn't like slashers or movies at all, and doesn't like... I don't think this is one that will convince you and win you over and subvert the trope for you and make you want to watch it. But I do think if you're a fan of, like, slashers or even stuff like the more modern ones like Scream, like, this one's on Amazon Prime. It's a fun enough watch with what it's doing that I think it might be worth giving a look if you haven't seen it before. To me, it's like a 6.
Yeah, for the New Year's gimmick, that's what makes it. That's what gives it extra legs. I think.
On the scale of slasher films. Now, if you were to just say, out of all movies in the world, if you're rating this, not on a curve, what is it? It's like it's a 4 or something. Yeah. But in terms of just like those types of movies, it's more like a 6. Like, it's not like one of the stone cold classics, but it also isn't one of the movies that just replicated those in a lesser form. It was something a little bit different. Yeah,
I would see right there with you a 6, because if you're looking for something to watch horror-centric on New Year's, like...
Yeah, because there's not a lot out there.
Yeah, this is not a bad choice, I don't think at all.
I would watch this over... I would recommend this over Terror Train, because aside the novelty of Jamie Lee Curtis, that movie doesn't have a lot there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now I can move into the spoiler discussion. And if you're listening via iTunes, do us a huge favor, leave a review there that helps other people find the podcast. We always enjoy seeing feedback and comments on YouTube, on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. You can email us at podcast@houseofvideostore.com if you want. You can find all the work we're doing at houseofvideostore.com. We should have some more stuff on Chad's Short Film Day Knock soon. And we're trying to get some project stuff figured out for 2019. But if you follow us on social media, you'll be able to keep up with all that. And then for us specifically, I'm on Instagram at @TheWilliamCaps.
And I'm at BlevinSean on Twitter. And I don't know, is our next episode going to be the year-end stuff or one more,
tentatively,
maybe?
I think we might start that. We'll have to see how the timing works out.
I don't know if we'll be able to do actually awards this year, because I feel like there's so much stuff we missed, and Derek has not seen like 2 of the more prominent horror films
so it's
of the
probably
year.
Just more of like a discussion.
Yeah, I think we just like, hey, what are some stuff we liked?
Yeah, so or maybe we can like assign like a movie of the year if we have enough consensus around something that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll have more stuff on that if you follow us on social media. But yeah, so now I'll discuss the spoilers for New Year's Evil. So full spoilers, like I said, not that the spoilers really change the movie that much. It's not like, movie really care about the characters, but at the end of the movie, so you do find out that your killer is actually the husband of the woman who's the MC.
Who they mentioned at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, because so I was a bit confused on what all the relationships were of all the people. So the beginning of the movie, so Diane Sullivan, who's like the rocker, like I forget what her stage name was. Before the performance, there's the guy Derek there. At first, like, I thought it was her brother or something, because he's like, "Have you heard from Dad?" So I thought initially that they were like siblings or something.
See, I always thought it was the son. Nicole was confused as well, too.
Because like because the actress was born in 42, and then he was born in 61. So like,
I thought he said mom or something in the beginning.
Well, like whatever it was, I wasn't paying enough attention to realize like that he was the son and she was the mom. So I guess if she had him young, that would work out.
Which those punkers, they're always getting pregnant.
Yeah. And then so Diane Sullivan, and then the killer is Richard Sullivan, her husband, who you hear mention of but don't see her talk to, or anything like that. And then you get the reveal at the end that he killed these other women. And then he was going to kill her because of how much he hated her. And that's why he called her and said that she would be the last. So that was the part where I was like, wait a minute. How much older is the actor that plays Richard Sullivan than his son Derek Sullivan? I think he's like 15, 16 years older. So I was like, well, I guess like you said before the other stuff, if you play like a few years up and down, then that's fine. That's not too problematic. But
I assume she was like 40 in the film and he was like mid-20s.
Yeah, so, like, whatever it was, like, at first it wasn't immediately clear to me and spelled out, but maybe just because I wasn't paying close enough attention.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, I knew that it was the son for some reason, and this time I did. Maybe I just assumed, but I, so he obviously is trying to talk to her. I think it was maybe the way he was talking to her, too. I felt like, he's like, I got this part, and she's like, oh, that's good, honey. And so then you see that he has some sort of issues going on because he puts the stocking over his head, pierces his ear. Yeah. And when he's like, I need to talk to you about an issue, and then she just ignores him again.
Yeah. So it's like kind of weird dynamics.
And then so the killer at the end, he basically says that she seduced her son.
Yeah. Or it's basically like, and he finally did this on his own, not using your name, and like blah, blah, blah. So like.
Yeah. Like maybe she seduced him. And I don't know. So she seems very twisted too, if you're to believe, right?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to remember exactly what his reasoning for disliking her. When it it sounded like basically she was making their son a beta instead of an alpha.
Yeah.
Was kind of some of the meaning I took away from it. If you're into that whole description of masculinity and stuff. And two, you find out that the character Richard, he had been in a mental institution previously. So, because like her manager, somehow he's crazy and he was in a mental institution or something. And then he didn't like how she was treating their son and I guess coddling him or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was his reasoning for going after these other women and then her. And then, at the end, he's trying to kill him in an elevator and stuff and it doesn't work. And then he gets chased by police to the roof. And instead of getting taken by the police, he jumps off the roof and then lands in the parking lot and dies. And that's one where it's clearly like a dummy they threw off.
Yeah.
And then it's just him laying with like his arm over his head and some blood. And then his son comes out and sees him and is like, no. And then they get the mom and put her in an ambulance. And then at the very last scene, you see that the ambulance driver is like dead in the floorboard and the son is the one driving away.
Putting the mask on
that his father was wearing.
Like a setup for a sequel.
So the son decided to take after the father. So that type of stuff, that really wasn't all that important, really, the family dynamics. Like in terms of the story is supposed to be, but in terms of how it plays out.
Yeah, unless, again, sequel-wise, and is it a commentary on, the how...
Like father, like son.
Well, even just the family dynamic. The mother obviously maybe did some things wrong too.
Yeah.
Not saying she did more things wrong. I don't know.
There's bad on both sides.
Yeah.
Okay?
So it bred this kid, and they even talk about like there being a sequence of something, which they didn't call him a serial killer, but a sequence killer. Yeah. What Mindhunter talks about that, like when they developed the term.
If you kill more than a certain
They talked
number.
about a sequence of something in this. So I wonder if this was the point when serial killer was a well-known term, or if they knew that was a little bit
when it was entering the mainstream
because they don't say a sequence of killings, they say a sequence of something, but they do specifically say that, and I know that was a terminology that is brought up in Mindhunter a lot when they were developing.
Serial killer was a term that came up after some of that stuff from the FBI and stuff in the 70s and 80s, but so the movie, the plot points of him being the main character's wife or being her husband. and then the guy Derek's dad. Like, I mean, like I said, the mythology of these characters isn't that important, and then the character of Diane, you don't really get enough of her to be solely in her corner. And
no,
she wasn't built up as like a great final character. You just kind of got like her introduction, and then her being worried about these killings, and then you didn't really get a lot of characterization beyond that. So it was hard to be that invested in any of them, but I think that's maybe where they had leaned more into the getting the kills pulled off by the time element and having more of the dramatic tension around that. It works better. But yeah, something like the twists weren't huge. Doesn't really change your ability to watch the movie knowing all that going in. It's not like, oh my God, like, sleepaway camp or something.
No.
But it was more just like, oh, well, maybe if they focus less on that and more on the elements
or if they somehow built that up better in the first act or whatever.
But then they would have had to spend more time before they got into the killings to actually do that. But yeah, so, movie was enjoyable enough, took a little bit different approach than a lot of the slashers from that era. And something, there was a good a good kernel of a concept there that could be mined for something else in a different format. But yeah, so I think that'll wrap up our discussion of New Year's Evil. So happy New Year's, happy holidays, or whatever you celebrate, or if you don't celebrate anything. I think the next episode we might start the year-end stuff, or not. Like I said, just follow us on social media and we'll have more updates on that. But that'll wrap up this episode of the House of VSR podcast. Thanks for listening.
House by the Video.